Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. There's been a lot of talk about a fight between Joseph Parker and Junior Fa, and originally it was sort of being sold along the lines from David Higgins, which is Joseph Parker's former promoter of Duco Events, but current manager, as more of a big domestic dust-up. But seemingly the narrative is changing on how they would want to pitch it to fans, more as this could be the best of a bad situation with, the world being effectively on lockdown, no boxing, who knows when it could come. Junior Fa and Joseph Parker, a rivalry from the amateurs, you would think it would sell itself to some extent. Although for me, and I've said this quite loudly in recent videos, it feels way undercooked. They haven't spent any real time in recent years building the rivalry. But Duco has come out and they've actually asked the question on social media. So remember, Duco Events, the company owned by David Higgins. Higgins manages, advises Parker, etc. So they asked, and see here on screen, this is on Twitter, but also they asked on Facebook, but we'll start with Twitter. If borders are closed for the rest of the year, do you want to see Junior Fa have a shot against Joseph Parker in the biggest Kiwi all-main event since Tua vs Cameron? And I wasn't quite sure what to expect in terms of how many people would say it's not quite there, but from what I can tell, the result seems to be quite overwhelming. So we'll start with this comment here. So Chris says, no, I get the intent, but Parker doesn't need to risk a cut against a prospect who frankly shouldn't even be mentioned in the same breath as a former world champ. Grant Farquhar says, it'll just be like Tua Cameron. The gap between Parker and Fa is massive now, and I've been wishing for the best for Fa up to this point. Shez says, yes, so this is one of the more few positive comments. It's Joe Boxer Parker's best opponent available. Iron sharpens iron. You should want to fight the best. Blindy says no. Nahu says, not yet, wait until Fa has had a few big fights. Jamie says, yes, the fight is better than no fight, and after a quiet last year, he needs to keep active as best he can under current climate, can smoke Lucas Brown after or before as well. And that seemingly is one of the things overall that I think has been lost on some fans, that this fight is not necessarily being targeted as this is the best guy available for him to fight. Remembering Joseph Parker, immediately after his win over Shaundell Winters, said he wanted to have a fight mid-year, which obviously, given current circumstances, probably won't be possible, but it could be later in the year. But he said he wanted a fight before a big fight. And that sort of implied that it was going to be potentially a fight against a lower risk opponent. And Junior Fa, who's relatively untested and unheralded, he does sort of fit that bill. There's less risk in fighting Fa than, say, Michael Hunter or Luis Ortiz, fights that fans would rather see Parker in, for example. But we'll go to the Duco Facebook page, much more commentary there. So someone says, rather Lucas Brown. Joshua, someone says, not really, Junior Fa has no real achievements. Sure as hell wouldn't pay pay-per-view for it. Junior Fa should fight Hemia here or something locally, or could have a New Zealand fighting series. Winner gets to go at Joseph Parker. Josh says, this ain't no super fight. Parker gains zero out of it except dollars, and Junior will get a boost if he wins and zero if he loses. This person, Nigel, says there is only one point to this fight, a filler while the world is still under COVID-19 restrictions. Unfortunately, bad management in the last 2 years has stalled Joe's career, and now COVID-19. Time's running out now. It's time to take the bull by the horns and shoot for the stars. Next 2 years makes Joe's career. No time to waste on Fa. And I think there is a number of fans who agree with that sort of sentiment, that the past 18 months or so does feel really like a lost period for Joseph Parker. He fought Alexander Flores as a confidence win at the back of December 18, but people thought after that he would be into a bigger and better fight. They didn't take the Chisora fight in April, thought they'd be sort of getting not enough time for a training camp, ultimately pulled out of the Chisora fight later in 2019. So he only had Leapai that year, and now it's Shaundell Winters in 2019, and now we have COVID-19. So it is one of these things, you never know what's going to happen in life, and it kind of feels that, a lot of boxers, I'm sure, will feel that they've been hard done by what's happened. But someone like Joseph Parker, by the time he gets back in the ring, he wouldn't have been in a real tough fight for over 2 years. And if he's taking I don't want to say a tune-up, because Junior Fa would be more than a tune-up. He'd be a better step up than the last 3 opponents. But until he gets to a big fight, it could be the best part of 3 years. So there is a sort of situation where there's a lot of time that could be lost in, his career not really being maximized in the way that he probably thought it might be. Obviously, he had the title, the fight with Joshua, the fight with White, but it's all gone sort of, I don't want to say downhill, but it's just really flatlined to some extent. But there are some people who are a bit more positive, saying if it means Parker from getting ring rust and a bit more money in everybody's hands in both camps, then yes, Parker has way more to lose, but better than being inactive. And I guess that's the question now, and a bit of a trade-off, inactivity as opposed to being in a meaningful fight. Because if Parker faces Junior Fa, there will be the critics who say, look, some people will see this as a 4th tune-up in a row, and it's not necessarily the best fight. And I'm sure the promotion, if it was to be made, they're going to be pitching this as the biggest fight, and we've already seen that in the question by Duco, the biggest domestic fight in a decade, between 2 guys who are ranked in the WBO and also IBF, and they'll be selling it, as they have already in the media, as guys who are top 10 heavyweights. Although, the WBO and IBF rank standings, that's not necessarily representative or a true top 10, because in the moment, 99.9% of people don't have Junior Fa anywhere near their top 10, a legitimate top 10. And that's not to disrespect him, he just hasn't put the work in, hasn't got the resume to justify being called a top 10 heavyweight. You can finesse it with the whole WBO rank standings, etc. But I guess, it's a sales tactic. It is what it is. Someone here says, I thought Fa would do big things in the division, but his fights have been flat and underwhelming. He got dropped by 43-year-old bum Dominic Gwynn. He does have the physical size advantage, but he won't have the tools to keep Parker off him. And this person says, could fight Fa and Hemi if able to get both in before able to fight abroad again. That's if they can all get relevant people needed, included doctors, judges, even if can't do with crowd, could do it in studio or empty arena. And that point about do it in a studio, empty arena, I don't think it would work in New Zealand, because the gate would be a big part of actually paying for the event and making some money, making some profit. And who knows actually when the sort of restrictions will lapse in terms of the strictness of them. Someone wrote a comment today saying, look, there could be fights in New Zealand a lot sooner than you think. There was an announcement today that we could get down to level 3. And my response to that was, because it depends on how you look at it. Because my take on what was announced by the New Zealand government was there was actually an extension to the level 4 lockdown. And the message was, we're trying to bank in the gains here. That's why we're extending it by a week or 5 days or whatever it was. But there was an extension. So I think the cautiousness will continue. So mass gatherings may not happen for a number of months. It's really hard to tell. Other parts of the world could end up opening up, much sooner than New Zealand. And it might be that, Joseph Parker, depending on, what's available in the world and if other places open up, he could end up going abroad to fight. It could actually end up happening that way as opposed to a local fight with Junior Fa. But they want to target the Fa fight, essentially because they're looking to maintain position with the ranking in the WBO. It's about risk and reward. They want to have a big fight after this one, but they see Junior Fa as a winnable opponent. Whereas Junior Fa, if he gets this fight, obviously he wants to be well paid and remunerated in case he does lose. But also it's his chance to prove that he's got the goods too, although it's a massive step up from where he's been fighting. Like as someone mentioned, Dominic Gwynn, and also there was Devin Vargas, and he was getting clipped a number of times by Vargas with that left hook in that fight. So at this point, Joseph Parker would be a massive favourite, but I encourage you to go have a look at the comments. I mean, as of wherever it was, there was like 165 comments at the time. But Parker gains nothing from this fight. Another one, doesn't make any sense. Jacob says, "Shut up, Duco. You won't do it." This one says, "Yes, it makes sense at this point for me." So there is, from what I can tell, an overwhelming vibe. This is obviously either boxing fans or Parker fans, so a combination of both here in this section, who are getting the Duco posts in their feed. So it's not just no one, it is sports fans. So it gives you a flavor of what people are thinking about this fight. But, it doesn't seem to be overly optimistic about them making it. This person here says, "Money hungry, trying to rob New Zealanders. If it's free to air, yes, but waste of money. Parker is way too smooth for far." Another one, "Haha, no, that's a backward step for Joe." Jay says, "They shouldn't fight each other yet. One of them will lose everything they have worked for." In these sorts of comments, there's a flavor, and a lot of comments can be sort of ring-fenced into the same sort of categories. People think it's not ready for it. They don't want to see it for certain reasons. They don't want to pay pay-per-view. It doesn't seem like the overwhelming vibe is for the fight. And I've been saying in my recent videos, I feel it's way undercooked. There's no real demand for this fight yet. Whereas Tua Cameron a decade ago, or 2009, people were thirsting for that fight. By the time it happened, it was probably past the point people wanted to see it, but it was a big build-up. There was a lot of animosity, and it ended up being one of those big events, and it was the biggest pay-per-view in New Zealand of all time. This feels like it's not going to do anything approaching the record numbers that maybe they would hope it would do. There seems to be optimism that because there's a lockdown, people are just automatically going to want to part with their money. But I think they also need to consider people are doing it tough right now. You can get a lot of free entertainment. Will people be willing to, if they've lost their job or they're down on hours or they can't work now because of restrictions, are they going to want to part with $40 or $50 to see a fight that isn't necessarily at the point where it should be? What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.